Hello and welcome to another guest episode of the Strategy and Soul podcast. Today we are joined by Julia Phoenix, known by Julia Phoenix 11 on social media if you ever want to find her. Of course, all the links will be in the description, but she is a leadership mentor for spiritual entrepreneurs and women all across the globe that are looking for healing, integrations, DNA activations, and getting more in touch with their own relationship with self to then move through that and work on their relationships and their communication and their boundaries. And tell us a little bit more about your work and how does this all interweave with specifically rapid shift integration and DNA activation?
Wow, what a great introduction. And yeah, that's a really great question. I've spent spent quite a bit of time figuring all of that out myself. Um, and I think, and I'm so happy to be here, by the way. Thank you so much for inviting me on. You're just such a joy to connect with. And I knew it's just going to be a super fun conversation. I'm just really happy to be here. And yeah, I think I'm someone who really sees things from a variety of different lenses and different levels and layers. So when I look at a whole person, or when I look at even an aspect of someone's life, like their business or their relationship, there's all of these different layers and these kind of levels that I feel like interweave with one another, right? So for a long time, I guess you could say I focused more on a specific level or layer that was maybe less integrative of the spiritual components. Well, I shouldn't say maybe, it really was less integrative of the spiritual components. It was really more focused towards the emotional elements, the psychological elements, and that has a lot to do with my field of study and in my education and different experiences and trainings that I had had, and also my own experiences. But when I started opening up more spiritually and expanding more in my own experience and also in my own knowledge and awareness of more of the metaphysical elements and the energetic elements, it became clear to me that it can't really be separated, And it also became clear to me that there were certain things that I personally was trying to heal using methods and modalities that weren't really getting the thing, or they were getting a layer of it, but there was more. And for me also, I felt really limited in a certain pool of understanding and working, working at this particular layer, the very, you could call it more kind of like 3D or, human, whatever. And I'm not dogging any of that stuff. I don't dog any of that stuff because it's all necessary and important. It's an important part of the whole. But I got a little bit stuck, to be perfectly honest with you. And when I started expanding in the ways that I was working with my own energy body, and when I started expanding in my own process, I began to see that there's a lot of people who are ready to integrate different layers of healing, who are ready to actually move beyond a paradigm of just healing to also activating potential, and that's really what DNA activation is about, is that it's about not only healing or clearing away layers of distortion or patterns that we're carrying, patterns from lineage, right? Not even just from this lifetime, patterns from past lives, all kinds of different influences that can be coded into our cellular matrix and our energy bodies and everything. But also just activating and amplifying that purest essence of who we are, so that we can bring that more out into the world, into our mission, our purpose work, as well as into every area of our lives, like into our relationship. It's just the ripple effect when we are connected to that true essence is immeasurable. And so that's where I like to work. And the DNA is really kind of just like the most microscopic sort of like expression of that ripples outwards and informs everything. So that's kind of how I look at it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And guess what? I'm just chuckling because all of this makes complete sense to me. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
similarities in the way that we work with other women's
Yes.
energetic bodies through our work. And
I
like
know.
we're talking about, yeah, it's so good. We're talking about catalytic energy and the way that your frequency of rapid shift integration, which is trademarked, that's your method, it's your modality that you've created that really encompasses all of the things you just talked about. And why that's important to me to express to you right now is because I'm a visionary. Everybody that knows me closely knows that I'm a seer. I'm a reader of the business blueprint. And you've also experienced some of my work before as well.
Yes.
And what this really shows is it's almost like a nervous system of a human. If you can imagine that the energy gets presented in a way where you can see all of the fascia and you see the way that all of these little electricity pulsates and moves throughout the body, and it's all connected. There is no separation between it. And that's something that I really want to highlight, that if you imagine there's little lights and it's almost like a grid of light, and some of them might be dim and they just need that illumination, and they need people like us to come in and activate them and illuminate the things that the actual human mind isn't comprehending or might not be aware of or isn't seeing. And so there's so much power. The other thing that I'm giggling about is that, and it's no harm to it, I love that you said, I don't dog the more 3D human mind work and somatics and emotions and understanding the difference between observing the thoughts and being inside of the stories. All of that is extremely crucial for a particular frequency. And there may be people that are listened up to this point and they're like, I have no idea whatsoever. These ladies are talking complete nonsense. It's jargon. It makes no sense. Some people will, and I don't like to use the term because of cultural appropriation, but they say it's woo-woo. And this will be advanced for their level of understanding, comprehension, access to information, and the integrations that they've been through. While there'll be other people that are listening, sitting there like you and I are, and we're nodding our heads and we're in confirmation that this is true for us. And we've experienced this. And so for anyone listening, I encourage you to open your heart and open your love frequency of acceptance, that maybe if you've stumbled upon this podcast and you're sitting there scratching your head and you are not certain of what we're talking about, just persist. Be open to the information and push yourself past the comfort levels of the information that you already have access to, and know that this may be something that is come into your awareness for a particular reason. And as Julia and I have a lot of experience with this new earth paradigm in business, life, love, all the things, in the layers of femininity as new earth leaders, that we are activating as we speak into things. And this is part of our gift of voice, of our tone that we use as we express things. And the work that we do is already unpicking and through your ears and through your nervous system and your energetic, spiritual, emotional, and physical body. And we also invocate that in the work and everything we do. We set these intentions every single day that when someone listens, they will be amplified and expanded in their truth and their understanding. And I wanted to bring that up because it may be that people will listen and they're like, I don't know. And that's okay. And there's absolutely pure love energy that comes from both Julia and I being so connected to ourselves and understanding, like, how did this even happen? Why did this happen? And then we can just share from that point of trajectory and bring other people to that frequency. And it's not higher than or more than or more advanced than and less than. There is no separation because we are all part of a soul family ecosystem worldwide.
That's right. So beautifully put. I just love how I can just jam with you. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so great. But I love what you brought forward too about the vocal tones and everything, because this is an interesting point, is that I came to understand at a certain point in time that, you know, that voice, even if it's not with the intention of moving energy or activating or anything like that, even just speaking, that I was already, I had been activating things, in people's fields, like moving energy with my voice. And I know that you're the same. And, it's just one of those gifts that I think we may not always understand how what we're called to do is impacting people, every layer of what we're called to do, whether it's like we're writing or we're speaking or we're singing or we're doing work on the back end of someone's business. We can be infusing magic into something and not even know it.
And through movement of energy. And so movement of energy comes even through our investments. When we invest in coaches, mentors, delegate to other people, that's an investment that we're making into other business blueprints, and we're integrating and entwining with all of that. We're talking about this ecosystem of grids and energy. And another one vision that just came to me was the dancers on the stage. They can still impact someone through the emotions just by simply moving their body, because that is their innate gift. And so I encourage any listeners and viewers to question yourself and say, well, what's my essence? Like, what is my beauty? What is my gift? What is the thing that I'm sharing that is actually out there, that has that ripple effect, where I can see people pulsating and moving and vibrating in their frequency on a different level than what they did before they came into contact with me? Because we all have gifts, and for a lot of us, they're just different. And what do you have to say about the uniqueness of someone's frequency or gift?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love this. And it's like, sometimes I feel like I get a little bit of flack from people. Usually people won't say it to me, but I can feel sometimes that it's like, oh, well, everyone's special and unique. That sounds a little narcissistic. She probably doesn't understand oneness or whatever. I do. Okay. I do understand oneness. I do understand, the unified field of consciousness and all of this. And there is a way where it's like, okay, we don't get to go around saying we're so special and unique that we are above everyone else, type of a thing, like you were saying. It's not about that. It is about the exquisite, intricate design of each human being and their soul in this body, in this lifetime. There is no replication that exists. And we are not operating here where we are on planet Earth in that, 12th dimensional conscious, we are in a world where we're meant to be fractals of source, and the light of source is funneling through individuals in very, very specific ways. It's almost like I look at the DNA as being like the prism of light that source is funneling through and expressing in each individual, right? So it's like a prism. It's the same light, but it's designed differently. It's coded differently, So we each have these very unique and innate gifts and abilities and talents and skills and energies, and a lot of different stuff that comes from, our higher self, that comes from our galactic incarnations, that comes from this lifetime, that comes from past life incarnations, that comes from our ancestry, from our lineage, right? And all of those influences are like packed inside of the DNA, and they all inform our life purpose, which is really just to say, like, the way that source energy wants to move through us in our lives on planet Earth. And so DNA activation and the work that I do with rapid shift integration is about really, it's almost like polishing a diamond. It's like about, okay, like whatever's obstructing that, whatever's obscuring that, whatever's keeping that kind of asleep, let's gently peel that back, and let's like awaken and amplify those gifts that you do have that make you so unique. And I do think it's a really important message for a lot of people, because I'm sure you experience this a lot as well in your work with business owners. There's a lot of comparison that happens, and there's a lot of mimicking that can happen. And there's a lot of like, oh, well, I'm not like Danica, or I'm not like Julia, or I'm not like Bashar, or I'm not like, whatever. I'm not like this business guru, or I wish that I could do X, Y, or Z, what they can do. I wish that my Claire's were, the same as theirs, or whatever the case may be. And like one of my biggest messages is that, like, if it was supposed to be that way, if you were supposed to have those specific access points or those specific gifts, like, you would. And the reason that you might not, I mean, sometimes people just don't have certain things turned on and it's like, oh, I actually can do that, but sometimes you might not, because it's not relevant to your mission. It's not meant for you. And I believe that we really come alive in our lives, and that we make the biggest impact when we are bringing forward what is ours to bring forward, when we are emanating our authentic essence as fractals of source.
It's so beautifully put. And there's a few key words that really came up. And one of them you'd mentioned at the end there, which is that authenticity.
Yeah.
And when we're in the alignment with that authentic core frequency, as I describe it, that we are able to catalyze ourselves and amplify in a lot more of a momentous way. A lot of people would put this alongside quantum leap, and we can get to the destination a lot faster, and we get to accelerate our experience through understanding ourselves and these core frequencies and the core layers. And once we're in alignment with precision and with action and discernment and boundaries and discipline, and all of those are a positive experience for us, or at least neutral. It doesn't even have to be in joy or gratitude, at least neutral. And we're not diminishing their value. We're not shaming ourselves when things are not feeling aligned, but we can move to neutrality and say, well, it is what it is. And getting back to that comparison, the thing that came up as well around that was people a lot of the time, they run here and they run there, and they want to buy into that program, or they want to get that coach, or they want to copy that person, do the strategy that they did. And there's a lot of cookie cutter programs out there. Everybody knows this terminology now. It's become quite trendy to call it out. And some people are calling it out in quite a toxic manner. They poke fun at it. They want to shame other facilitators for the way they're doing things. And they've only been able to access and integrate into their own businesses these courses and programs from the information that they have. And so part of Julia and my own mission is really to bring it forward new information. And most of the time, it's actually remembrance. It's old information that we're bringing to the front, so that you can then also be empowered in your leadership, empowered in self-leadership, empowered in understanding yourself in a very deep way. So everything you're creating is from that experience of source that's moving through you at all times, and be attuned to that source frequency more often than not. And that is what creates this precise aligned action in business. And in particular, when you go to hire someone, and you want to make sure that it's not someone that's just going to tell you exactly the 5 steps towards something, because that old paradigm way of teaching and of mentoring and of consulting is different. We're coming into more aligned ways, where even in the coaching world, coaches are the ones that are leading you to your own conclusions. And so that frequency, even in mentorship, is becoming more prevalent, because people are realizing that the more empowered they are, the more self-aware they are, and the more neutral they can be without attachment to stories and so on, then they get to accelerate. And just rewinding even further, distortion was the other key word that came up when we said there are no replications. And the reality in my world and my perception and the way I see things is that there are DNAs that are desiring to be replicated through experiences with more negative entities, beings, and human beings. And those frequencies are creating distortions in the same way, which was the next topic you moved to, of comparison. It creates a distortion in someone's unique core frequency. And then when they create from that distortion, everything around it gets murky, confusing, burnt out. We see physical symptoms and ailments that then filter through to someone's personal life, and the way that they carry their body through autoimmune diseases, migraines, all sorts of physical symptoms, stumbling, being clumsy, stubbing your toe, they are all signs that something is potentially out of alignment. And not all of the time, let's be honest. Like you said, we're still humans. Sometimes you might just be thirsty and you haven't had enough water and you feel a bit dizzy. So go drink some Celtic salt water and you'll be fine. But but if this is something that's happening on a frequent basis and you're getting these red flags after red flags after red flags, and you're not addressing it, and you're not in leadership of yourself in why are these symptoms, like we got to ask different questions to come to different conclusions now as we're moving into this new paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that you're saying is 100% correct. And there have been, I mean, I know I can talk about this with you. I'm never sure with people and their listeners sometimes how to go, how much depth I get to go into on certain things. But yeah, I mean, there have been some of these distortions. I mean, they definitely didn't begin with us in our lifetime. And there are, very intentional kind of interferences that have happened with our genetics that, that have caused a lot of these distortions, that have prevented our genetic matrix from fully activating in the way that it's meant to, and so it's also like, I think we get to have a lot of grace for ourselves, like for whatever it is that we are carrying, where it's like we are feeling these like limitations and these like really off places, or we're feeling even things like, feeling really trapped or feeling like not good enough. I mean, there's so many different sort of locations where those things can come from, like trauma in this life and different things. But like some of it is actually like programmed. It's literally programmed into your cells, like to carry certain genetics that cause you to feel like I'm going to be a slave to the system for the rest of my life and I'm not free, for example.
Yeah, and I would also love to add to that, they're not only been programmed throughout history and throughout indoctrination into certain dogma, whether that's political or religious or educational, and we can go there because the less filters we have on our authenticity, the more magnetic we are for our aligned dreamiest clients anyway. So if people are awakened and they understand these things, or they're curious and they need to educate themselves more, this is a place to come for these types of conversations. So open to it. And then there was a point I wanted to make just then around the consistent reprogramming of distortion, which is coming through, in particular, a thing that I'm very passionate about, and how I grew up in musical theater and being a singer-songwriter and having this experience in the music industry. The frequencies in which they are using in music and the subliminal messages that they put inside of mainstream music, and I'm speaking into subliminal messages in the music tracks, the frequencies that you cannot hear. And I record music for my clients all of the time. My light language activations, you'll find them on YouTube if you're interested. Go back to my channel. But you can just layer tracks, and all you need to do is decrease the volume on some of them, and the other ones are higher, and all you're listening to is the loudest track. But there are still subliminal messages and repetition. And if you also wanted to delve deeper into this topic and you're unfamiliar, look into backmastering. Reverse these tracks. And they used to do this all of the time. If you want Stairway to Heaven, go on YouTube that. Backmastered Stairway to Heaven. Backmastered All the Single Ladies. And you will hear more about what I'm speaking into and why it is important to be very consciously consuming particular frequencies. And sometimes that requires, as we step into sovereignty and we step into reducing the distortions around us that are being consistently wanting and desiring to be reprogramming us and keeping us stuck, we need to reassess the things that we're consuming and have different boundaries. And it does change our lifestyle sometimes. And that is a sacrifice that I'm willing to make to keep the potency of my core frequency alive and amplifying consistently. For my community, for my family, my children. I've got 4 children. It's extremely crucial for the legacy that we create with the next generations to become aware of what's going on in the film and TV and the symbols. These are so important.
I mean, there's so much. And I've seen, I know I've mentioned this to you before, but you know, you guys, I knew Danica and I were soulmates when I saw her calling out certain certain public figures in the media for the programming that is happening. And
Add me on Facebook,
you
guys,
know,
if you
I was
want.
like, this woman gets it.
Yeah.
And it's not to, you know, it's not to create fear for anyone, but it is
Mm-hmm.
to create awareness. I love that your life path, you know, and your work in the music industry and everything really prepared you to be able to understand and speak into some of these things. That the backmastering isn't something that I've personally looked into a lot, but there are certain, I mean, in music, I mean, I'm very aware. It's also the frequency tones that are used, and I mean, don't even get me started on some of these live concerts and what's going on there.
These are
And,
ceremonies, these are rituals. This is why
yeah,
often there are particular numbers of people. If we look at the world tour, there's a lot that we can say. And being that this will be uploaded to YouTube, I need everybody to also be aware that content such as this can and does end up in the firing line because of the way
it
that
does.
we're speaking. The AI tracks particular keywords and particular frequencies of information that we are putting out. And people might say, oh, as if, but I'm telling you, if you want to look at Tim McDonald, perfect example. Is it Tom or Tim? I think it's Tom McDonald. I will post his link in the description for anybody. And he's a truther. And at the same time, I don't really trust anybody that's got millions of views on YouTube, because there are
Mhm.
platforms, we are being censored with this information, and there are people out there, not going to name too many names here because we have a lot of information about the people that are also controlled opposition in some way, and it's not, as we said, to create any fear or people scrambling and saying, oh my God, I didn't know any of this. This is hectic. And it's like, yes, this is hectic. This is important. This is something to be educating yourself on and to be aware. And just going back a little bit to the scales and the music frequency,
Yeah.
the frequency of 440 hertz and the way that they've manipulated their solfeggio scale. This is like other work that you can do if you want to go and Google all of these things. They've changed the actual notes, which is why sometimes when you listen to people that do toning and they use frequency in their sound healing, the pitch sounds like it's a little off.
Mm.
But our soul has these codes and the information, and so the pitch is off according to mainstream music. But is the pitch actually off? Because
Right.
I've seen people step out of my sessions and they're like, whoa, I feel completely different. But I might have been saying, "Oh," and everyone's like, oh, that sounds so ugly. But does it? Or is it based on
Right.
the perception of societal's indoctrination of what beauty is supposed to sound like? So we get
Ooh,
to question everything.
that's right. Yeah, no, I have the same experience, you know, with the tones that I bring through, the frequencies that I bring through my voice. It's not necessarily, I mean, it doesn't sound necessarily like mainstream music. And I think there's a reason for that. And I think that's more than okay, you know. And I think it's also just like, rather than being about fear, it's really just about awareness, and it's about
Yes.
expanded awareness, and it's about putting yourself into a position where you can now have the expanded awareness to choose and to be more sovereign. And I think that that is really so much of what our journey is about and needs to be about moving forward. I'm really, really into, you know, sovereignty as like the core thing on a spiritual level outside of authenticity. Probably, I guess that's probably, you know, authenticity of course is super magnetic in every area of life, in business, in relationships, in love, like in everything. It's like the highest frequency there is, really, is like true authenticity. But sovereignty, which is just like really the ability to choose.
Yeah, and it's almost like the authenticity in action is the choosing.
Mhm. Yes.
But
Yes, exactly.
yeah, it's
I
like
love
that's
that.
the action that we take is when
Yeah.
we're sovereign. They are the actions that we take when we label something as this is a sovereign action, or this is a
Yeah.
choice that I'm making to step more into the authenticity. And
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful, beautiful way to put it. So moving on further than that, you do have a lot of activations that are available on your website. You've also got a membership. Do you want to speak into your offers a little bit as we wrap up this episode? And like, what do you actually sell? Because the other thing, one last thing, in your content as well, it might not sound like everyone else's content, ladies. It might not look like everyone else's content, but that is the point. That is the point that we're making here, that it gets to be a little bit ugly, a little bit quirky, a little bit weird, but according to who? Like, who made up these words to label us? We don't need the labels. We just need to create.
That's right. Yeah. And I also like to create from a variety of different aspects of myself. I mean, we are multidimensional beings. So, I've been told in the past, never by you, Danica, but by other people, like, business mentors or whatever. And people will talk about like, well, you have to have a consistent tone in everything that you post where it all sounds the same. First of all, I have an open throat in human design. Like, it's going to sound differently, actually, depending on what the audience is and what's needed. Right. But it's also like, I am not just one thing. Like, my authenticity includes a multi-prismatic expression of different aspects of myself and whatever's flowing through me on a particular day and whatever's needed for the collective, right? So I appreciate you mentioning that. I think that's a good note for people, because sometimes the relationship to consistency, I think, can get a little unhelpful.
Yeah, I love it. I like to use the word cohesive and congruent.
Cohesive, yes.
Yeah, because again, it's coming back to that, like the meshing of the ecosystem, the nervous system, the way things are intertwined, and they are all just a moving piece. Like you said, they're all the layers of. And so if you look at cohesiveness across the brand, cohesion can exist without things needing to sound the same. It just means that there's different layers that are all attaching to each other.
Yeah, all the threads woven together.
Yeah. Weaving. Oh, that's another. I love that word. Woven,
Me too.
weaving,
That's
tapestry.
One of my favorite words. Yeah. So the work that I do, I mean, I work with a variety of different people in a variety of different containers with a variety of different price points, and each, it's for unique individuals, right? And unique pathways. So my membership is called the Rapid Shift Collective. I just had a great call with them this morning, and I hop on there twice a month and share transmissions and activations, and it's just a great community. We get to show up, and the calls are pretty interactive in the sense that I'm really working with the energy that's presented by the people on the live calls, and also, of course, people who aren't in the space but will be watching later. And it's really beautiful because, a lot of people are going through different things in their awakening process, and they're having the experience of these activations kind of, switching things on for them and being catalyzed, and people can really support one another within that container and share about weird ideas, weird.
Yeah, and I want to celebrate
us,
the funny part here, everyone, is that we're talking about a leadership mentor. And so this is the perfect example of a woman that carries herself in full embodiment of the work that she then professes, teaches, and sermons to other people. Like, we need you to be in leadership. We want this as being a leader. But Julia is in complete trust of her channel to just show up and present regardless, not attached to any outcomes. And so just want to celebrate you in that, because this is your leadership. This is the expression and the action of sovereignty in leadership. It's amazing. And not everybody has that trust in their channel where they just show up. And I also did my membership call this morning, and I just sit and I do my meditation. I'm like, okay, this is what we're talking about today. Yeah. And then it just floods out, and I'm like, okay, right, cool.
Same thing. Yeah, it does take a lot of trust. It's also, I find it easier, than sitting there in my mind trying to think about,
because our body knows.
What does everyone want from me? Like, I don't need to think about any of those things. I just get into, my alignment. I open up the channel, I open up the field, and it's always perfect what comes through, I feel like, and it's also, in a membership space and in a group space, there's such a beautiful collaborative energy too. So I also don't, even though I'm holding the frequency and I'm steering the ship, so to speak, and this is really just kind of like a part of my leadership style also, it's a co-creative effort. And so it's not like I'm just doing it alone. Like,
Yes, and I
no,
feel that
never.
you're also measuring this perfectionist part of it as it's perfect, because the clients are the ones that are sitting there nodding their head or messaging you after the session and going, "Whoa,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
something else," or they're commenting in the chat like, "Yes, oh my God, this totally resonates." Like, that's
Yeah.
how we measure our level of authentic transmissions, when other people are getting the results and we're like, "Oh my God, this is the best thing ever," because that's why it doesn't drain us, because that's where they say
Exactly.
work doesn't feel like work when it's soul work, when you're on your path, when you're in your mission and you're in complete givingness and in full service to your community. You're not going to be sitting there going, "Oh, I've got the jitters, I don't know, this isn't planned, or it's not going to be good enough, it's not perfected enough, it's not." And it's like, your people are there, they've paid you, and even if they haven't, they've signed up for something free. It doesn't matter about that exchange. Their time is their payment to you. So let's honor
Mhm.
that and respect that, and be so grateful that people will invest whatever they can. And if you're offering something for free, their time is that investment. And so they're coming back at you with their energy. They're there for a reason. So showing up as your most authentic self is the best service, because they've obviously loved something that you said somewhere along the line. So don't doubt yourself when you're doing any of these presentations, ladies. And I think, yeah, just talking about like your one-on-one work a little bit more,
Yeah,
you would go obviously a lot deeper into a personal transmission
of
and like,
course.
yeah,
Yeah,
solo
of course.
channeling.
Of
Yeah.
course. So like so the Soul Brilliance reading, which I know we're gonna give your viewers, your listeners a
Yes.
special discount code, but that's a
Mhm.
recorded reading, transmission, and activation where I'm really looking at a person's soul codes and reflecting back to them their brilliance, and also activating, more of that brilliance to come through. It's different than like a psychic reading that would be like, well, you're meant to do X, Y, and Z, because it's not necessarily always about what the product is meant to look like in that, in this particular offering. It's more about like your unique essence, and then that funneling into, whatever it is that you want to create, right? So the feedback I've gotten from that, those are just so fun and so beautiful, because I'm able to see like this unique brilliance of everyone. And people sometimes ask me like, well, isn't this something that everyone kind of has, or like, do you ever get two that are the same? And I'm like, literally never. Never. And it's always like so surprising to me and like so different. Like, whoa, you got this thing going on. Like, that's like amazing. And it honestly gives me hope for humanity, because of um just this excellence, this brilliance of each soul, and how they can impact the collective in very specific ways, in ways that I could never, you know? Um, so that's a really fun one. And then I have my one-to-one rapid shift integration sessions, which are, we go in and we do the activation, we do the coding, we do a lot of typically release work in those sessions as well. And some of that can get quite specific in terms of like your particular ancestry, particular stuff you've got going on in your field. You know, there's all kinds of things that can come up in that, sometimes it's like, oh, we're removing a curse today. Like there's
Yeah.
different things that, that kind of happen, but it's very, and the feedback I've gotten with that as well is the precision. It's very precise and very in depth for the individual. So that's quite different than the group work. And then with my mentorship containers, I have 3-month or 6-month long mentorship containers that are open to women, where, I'm working with them a lot on mastering their gifts. That's one of the things I've been enjoying most recently. I also have a group program, Conduit, which will be running again come September, which is for women who are, wanting to really bring through their medicine in a powerful way, to become that vessel. But the other, one-to-one longer term mentorship containers, the 3-month and the 6-month, are for feminine leaders, and the 6 month has a little bit of focus on business also, whereas the 3 month, we don't really do that. It's more either sometimes it's more of a relationship focus depending on what people are needing, or sometimes it's really more about mastering and trusting their psychic gifts and their psychic abilities. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of my offer suite there.
It's so beautiful. I love it a lot. And I'm so grateful that we got to have this conversation today as well, because there's a lot of mirroring that's going on between the two of us.
I
And I love
know.
I love our ecosystems, and I love the type of women that we attract into our spaces, and the
Yeah.
level, at the depth, the intimacy of the work that we do. Like, all of it fascinates me so much to hear from other sovereign leaders that are really in that space of the illumination and the application as well, giving people tangible things to take away and say, well, if this is the thing, these are some actions you can take. So it's that diagnosis and then moving them into action and giving them the clarity around why may this be happening for them. So thank you, Julia. And as always, please leave us reviews, comments, send us DMs. All the links will be in the descriptions, and we'll love you and leave you.
Thank you so much, Tanika. This was excellent.